Right now, somewhere in the Atlantic, a single U.S. warship has become the focus of intense global attention. The USS George H.W. Bush, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier that departed from the U.S. East Coast and is now steaming eastward across the Atlantic, is following a route that immediately raises questions. This is the traditional path toward Europe, the Mediterranean, and potentially far beyond. Officially, this is described as a scheduled deployment, but unofficially, almost nothing about it feels routine. The carrier is maintaining a faster than normal transit speed, skipping the long pauses that usually mark a calm deployment. Analysts tracking naval movements have noticed the tempo, steady, deliberate, and urgent. This is not a ship wandering. This is a ship heading somewhere specific. So the real question is simple. Is the USS George H.W. Bush on its way to Iran to reinforce the Abraham Lincoln? The George H.W. Bush is not traveling alone. It is leading an entire carrier strike group, a layered shield of guided missile destroyers and cruisers designed to protect the carrier from drones, cruise missiles, and long-range ballistic threats. On board, the carrier is loaded with the full Carrier Air Wing 7. That means F-18 Super Hornet fighter jets for strike missions, EA-18 Growlers for electronic warfare, E-2D Hawkeyes acting as flying command centers, and support aircraft ready to keep the air wing flying around the clock. In total, close to 80 aircraft are embarked, a small air force at sea, capable of launching strikes hundreds of miles inland. The escorting destroyers are just as critical. Armed with the Aegis combat system and vertical launch cells packed with interceptors and cruise missiles, they form a defensive bubble designed for one scenario above all others, operating close to a hostile coastline under missile threat. So the conversation is no longer about capability. That part is clear. The real question now is far more dangerous. Where exactly is this carrier headed, and what changes when it gets there? Here's something that often gets lost in headlines. This isn't about one ship. Right now, roughly 10 U.S. Navy vessels are operating in and around the waters surrounding Iran. That includes an aircraft carrier, multiple guided missile destroyers, littoral combat ships, logistics vessels, and surveillance platforms. And another destroyer is on the way, the USS Truxtun. Each Arleigh Burke-class destroyer carries around 90 to 96 vertical launch cells. Those cells can be loaded with Tomahawk cruise missiles, SM-2 and SM-6 air defense missiles, and ballistic missile interceptors. One destroyer alone can strike targets hundreds of miles inland, or defend an entire naval formation from aerial attack. Littoral combat ships, often underestimated, play a different role. They operate closer to shore, tracking fast attack craft, mines, and small boats. Exactly the type of asymmetric naval warfare Iran relies on in the Strait of Hormuz. Altogether, we're talking about thousands of sailors, dozens of radar systems, layered missile defenses, and a level of maritime awareness that makes it extremely difficult for Iran to move unnoticed. So ask yourself, is this a defensive posture, or the final setup before something breaks? While all eyes are on the incoming George H.W. Bush, the USS Abraham Lincoln is already extremely active. This carrier has been conducting high-tempo flight operations day and night, live weapons drills, missile exercises, combat air patrols, mid-air refueling, coordinated strike rehearsals, fighter jets launch, refuel in the air, simulate attack runs, return, rearm, and launch again. Electronic warfare aircraft practice jamming and suppression. Command aircraft coordinate everything in real time. This is not what a Navy does when it's just showing the flag. This is what a carrier does when it is maintaining readiness for immediate combat operations. And that matters because readiness shortens decision time. When forces are already positioned, armed, and rehearsed, escalation can happen faster than diplomacy can react. The most alarming part of this situation isn't the number of ships, it's the incidents. In early February, an Iranian drone was shot down by an F-35C launched from the Abraham Lincoln. That alone marks a serious escalation, stealth fighters engaging Iranian assets directly. Then there was the attempted interception of a commercial oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian forces moved to seize or harass the vessel, only to be stopped by the USS McFall, which intervened and forced the Iranian units to withdraw. Fast attack boats, dozens of them, have been swarming U.S. ships, not at a distance, not cautiously, but aggressively. In several encounters, Iranian Revolutionary Guard speedboats maneuvered dangerously close to U.S. warships, forcing evasive actions to avoid collisions. These are not accidents. They are deliberate pressure tactics. And the behavior has changed. These boats are no longer just patrolling. Crews have been observed training machine guns and rocket launchers directly at U.S. personnel. That is a direct threat, not posturing. Even more concerning, there have been attempts to interfere with flight operations, maneuvering near carrier strike groups in ways that could complicate aircraft launch and recovery from the Abraham Lincoln. Interfering with carrier aviation is one of the fastest ways to turn a tense standoff into open conflict. Because at that point, commanders have to ask a terrifying question: was that harassment or preparation? This is how wars often begin, not with declarations, but with miscalculations. A drone shot down, a tanker almost seized, a fast boat gets too close, a missile radar locks on for a second too long, a pilot aborts a landing because a patrol craft crossed a safety zone, and suddenly restraint gives way to reaction. The arrival of the George H.W. Bush will not calm this situation. It will intensify it. Militarily, it strengthens deterrence. Politically, it raises the stakes. Two carriers would mean nearly 160 U.S. combat aircraft within striking range of Iran. That is overwhelming power. But it is also a pressure cooker. So the real question isn't whether the United States can dominate the region. It's this: when so many armed forces operate this close, for this long, how long before something goes wrong? Because once it does, there may be no easy way back. And right now, the U.S. Navy is not pulling away. It's closing in.